Hello, everybody. Welcome to part 2 of our 3-part series of Ready, Set, Go. 2 weeks ago, we did the Ready, Set, Go in Zone Haven portion of it. Tonight, we're going to do more of the home hardening and defensible space. I'm Division Chief David Cosgrave with CAL FIRE. We have the contract for Coastside Fire and San Mateo County Fire, and I'm also the lead instructor and program manager for Coastside CERT. Again, welcome. And if you remember from 2 weeks ago, Fire Captain Austin Seeley's here. Say hello, Austin. Make sure
everybody. My name is Austin Seeley. I'm a Deputy Fire Marshal for San Mateo County Fire, CAL FIRE. I am the Wildland Urban Interface Risk Reduction Captain. So this is going to be some pretty good information we're going to try and cover tonight and get you some preparedness for the wildfire season coming up.
Okay, and we also have Cecile Juliet, the Public Information Officer for CAL FIRE, San Mateo County, and I guess everyone, all CAL FIRE, and San Mateo CZU, Santa Cruz and San Mateo County Fire. Cecile, you want to say hello?
Hello, everybody. Glad to be here. Glad you're joining us.
Okay, and this is the webinar format, so we don't see or hear you, but the chat feature down below on your screen, if you look at the very bottom, there's a little chat index there. We'll be monitoring questions throughout the presentation from our 2 presenters and a question and answer at the end. So you'll be able to use that. With that, first I'll introduce John DeLong. He's retired from a career in upper management in the paint and coating industry. He is a founding director and treasurer of the South Skyline Fire Safe Council and on the advisory for the Santa Clara County Fire Safe Council. So John, can you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and a little more about yourself and what South Skyline is? A lot of people aren't familiar with that little niche and the dangers you have up there.
Yeah, good point. The South Skyline area runs approximately from Skylonda or Highway 84 in the Woodside area all the way down to almost Highway 17. It goes to Bear Creek Road at the south end. It's about 26 miles long and a couple of miles wide. So it's just a strip of, we have about 500 homes here, and we were not well represented by other fire safe councils. So about 12 years ago, we created our own, and we are growing every year and doing quite well.
Okay. And our first presenter tonight is going to be Ed Hayes, a retired civil engineer with 45 years working in the construction industry. Ed has been the vice president of the South Skyline Fire Safe Council for the past 4 years, working on educating residents on defensible space and organizing a free chipping program. And he's been involved for the past 3 years with establishing the new Fire Safe Council of Santa Cruz County and serves on the board. So thank you, Ed. And when you get a chance after you introduce yourself, Ed, you can share your screen, and I'm gonna mute myself and step out.
Okay, now we find out whether we can technically do this. Okay.
That's it.
Okay. Can we see me? Everybody see me?
Yes,
Because I can't see you.
your presentation is going. Yeah.
Welcome. I was asked to do this, and so to follow up on John, I've been involved with both the South Skyline Fire Safe Council and was one of the founding board members for Fire Safe Council Santa Cruz, which is, as you said, it's only 3 years old, actually back 2.5 since we actually got started. But both councils were instrumental in providing information for this, and you'll find that that fire safe councils are more or less county-based, but as John said, because of our location in South Skyline, we kind of have to work with all of the fire safe councils in the area, and with the introduction of fire as a real threat up here now, it's real important. So tonight, I want to talk about how the fire works, and then what defensible space requirements you can develop around your home, and then how to harden your home. And then we'll finish up with evacuation preparedness in the event of fire. So you need to know the basics of fire, types of fire, and how does it behave. If you start there, then you can start understanding how to protect against it. So understanding the wildfire behavior, what causes intensity, what causes the flame lengths, how does a wildfire attack a structure, what happens with wind, and then there's tree torching, defensible space, and how to reduce fire intensity. And these are all the subjects that we're going to look at tonight. So the basics of fire: fuel, oxygen, and heat, or a spark, equals fire. And I think everybody's known that. But what's a wildfire? Wildfire has the fuel, but then it's affected by the weather, the topography, and that equals the intensity. And that kind of leads to, there's two types of fires that we talk about. There's it's hard to say a standard fire. There's a fire that is not driven by weather, let's put it that way. That's fires that we had in the past, before climate change. Wildfires were always part of the environment, but they moved along the ground and they ran into the trees, but they did it without being driven by a weather scenario, and which led to what we're seeing now, which is more intensity in the fires. And they're normally, because of the fuel being so dry, weather drives the fire with a wind, and then we're getting it into areas where there's steep slopes and compacting the fire, so the intensity becomes greater. And all of these impact the flame lengths and the ember casting, which you'll see causes the most damage in the fires now. So wildfires, there's 4 ways that wildfires will attack your structure. And this is your house. And number 1, everybody would figure out it's direct flame contact. In a wildfire, the fire moves through the forest with flames that are, as you see in the picture, but in the front of the fire is the heat. And the heat, the radiation from that fire causes things to dry out in an area in front of the fire. So this is like the face of the fire that moves through the forest. And you'll have heat and then the flames coming behind. The flames generate embers. Embers fly off the top of the trees. Embers will move downwind or down slope, and then they land out in front of the fire. And if it's preheated, they'll light right away, and in other parts they may smolder until the fire catches up. When you have slopes and a little bit of wind, the fire will burn up the slope. And now you've got some embers that are blowing in front of the fire. What we found over the last few years that is embers seem to be the most destructive part of the fire anymore. They're moving and attacking structures at your house, and they're moving very rapidly. And so they're getting into the small cracks and crevices and places where you haven't cleaned for a while. These are things that are definitely causing trouble. And what's it take? You can see on the right-hand side, the smoke that arises out of the intensity So the intensity of fire determines how high that smoke column is. And in that column are the embers. And a little bit of wind moves those embers out in front. So a lot of wind moves them further and further away. And therefore, fires are starting up farther and farther out in front of the fire front, which really wreaks havoc on the firefighters trying to keep control of the fire. Just to give you an idea, this is going to be a little 60-minute video. It exhibits all of the things that are on there. You're going to see some extreme fire, some wind-driven fire. You're going to see the flame lengths, how they develop. And just keep in mind how quickly this happens. You probably have maybe, not the brightest guy in the world here, but he's obviously trying to get rid of some weeds in front of his patio, but there's some wind. And so he started a small fire. Now already the column is 4 to 6 feet long. You can't see it, you're gonna see it. Here's what happens. You're gonna watch the left side of the screen and see some green bushes right there. But note in particularly here, the green is not burning. The fire is getting inside there where there's dead material, and that's what catches on fire first. Now this happens in the forest itself and can happen close to your house. Look at what occurred in 60 seconds. Those flames are now reaching what, 25 feet high, and it's moving a heat column in front of it. And this is really what a fire looks like, coming at your house. We just had the CZU fire, and this is a home that was, I believe it was in the Bonnie Doon, or I think it was in the Boulder Creek area. It kind of gives you an idea of what can happen if you haven't cleared brush at the base of the trees in your area. I mean, this is minimum 6 feet, probably higher than that. But take a look at the brush pile here. There's a brush pile back here. And what happened in this situation? Those brush piles caught into this tree, and the tree went up. If you look on the left, you'll see that it looks like a pretty clear space around that home. But this tree is over 30, 40 feet away from the house, but it's 60 to 100 feet high. Embers cast off of that, not even with a big wind. And where did they land? They landed on a wood deck. And the wood deck caught on fire, and you can see the result of that. So one of the things, the biggest things that we are going to talk about in defensible space is to eliminate these, what they call ladder fuels, the brush on the ground, the fuel that's on the ground, and then to try to cut open, limb up your trees so that the fire can't reach up into the trees and create this ember casting. You can see that all of this undergrowth here burned, and the intensity it was high, because look at the char on those tree stumps. It's the main contributor to the intensity of your fire. So removing ladder fuels are really important. So what needs to be done for us? Because it's the first line of defense, your first ability to be able to slow down the fire, to control the intensity. Right now, this is by law, and CAL FIRE is the instrument that enforces this. There's 3 primary zones to be watching in creating defensible space around your house. And what they'll tell you is that you should be working, take your house and work from the house out to create this defensible space. So zone 1 is the 5-foot zone. That's the red line. A 5-foot zone directly adjacent to the house. And right now that should be what we call the non-combustible zone. Everything should be cleared from that area that can burn. So think about that in terms of creating either dirt or concrete, some sort of patio area, but that area should be clear. The second zone is the 5 to 30 foot, and that's called the lean and green zone. Here you want to remove all dead and dying fuel. You want to make sure that your trees and your shrubs are spaced out. And then you'll move out to your 30 to 100 where your spacing and thinning even becomes, you want to do a little bit more. So think about the fire front coming at you. As it's coming through the woods, it's burning at the intensities that we just saw. And when it hits that zone 3, you want it to hit the ground. You want to bring it out of the trees. You want it to hit the ground, and you want it not to have fuel that can combust into the trees anymore. So looking at on the right-hand side, you want to break that fuel continuity. So you probably see a house or your wooded area looking a little bit like the top, but you want to remove those flatter fields. So you want it to look like that bottom space. Limbed up all the high trees. You want to space out the smaller bushes or small trees. In the bushes, you don't want your brush or bushes to be thick, because in the interior, as you just saw in the little video, the interior gets woody, and the dead parts are actually the ones that start that bush on fire. So you want to thin, you want your bushes to look a little bit more like that. So here's kind of what spacing should look like. 5 foot out, you don't want to see anything. Now, it doesn't mean it has to look ugly. It can look good, and you can have some ground cover and things like that. But 5 to 30 feet out, you want to keep your trees apart. You want the ground to be cleared, like we said. And then as you move out, they can be a little closer together, but you still want to keep some spacing between your trees and keep it clear. The thing you need to take, we talked about topography. Some of the things that you have to think about with your shrubs. Typically a shrub, the flame heights will go twice as high to 3 times as high as the height of the shrub. So think about what would be above your shrubs. If there's a tree up there, then you've got to limb that tree up about 3 times as high as the shrub you're growing. And then by the same token, on a slope, you want to do the same thing. So you can even see on a very steep slope, a 2-foot high shrub, you want it to be about 12 feet apart, going up that shrub, up that slope. Trees the same way. You know, the steeper the slope, the further apart you want to keep the trees, and spaced out as well. So how do you help we just went through and how do you help your house save itself? Well, first of all, when a fire's coming, think about this too. I didn't mention it earlier, but when the fire front comes to your house, if it's not an extreme wind-blown fire, the fire front will still probably pass your house in about 10 to 15 minutes. If you've lowered the intensity, it will slow that intensity down and you won't be worrying about the radiant heat or the flame lengths hitting your house. So when we get to hardening your house, remember that that flame front, your house probably only has to survive that flame front for about a 15-minute duration. Now the embers is a different story. So what do we want to do? We want to reduce fuels, reduce flame length, prevent a surface fire from increasing intensity of the fire. You do that by breaking the continuity. You want to thin your trees, remove the ladder fuels. Make sure that you work on that 5-foot non-combustible zone. And now you want to work on your house. So let's take a little look at how do you go about assuring that your house is ignition resistance. I don't believe yet, well, unless you built it all out of concrete, you might have a home that won't burn. But most of the homes in the WUI area that have all been built in the last 50 years, all are susceptible to fire. But there's some priorities you can look at with your home. And part of why we're setting priorities, because you probably don't have the time, the money, and the ability to do everything all at once. And you kind of have to remember that hopefully the fire is not coming tomorrow. So you want to take a look at what can you do first to make sure that your home begins to be able to defend against that fire. So we're going to here. And the roof and the edge of your roof is really going to be one of the biggest issues. And why is that? Well, we just talked about embers being blown miles from the front of the fire. And those are the things that are going to begin to land on your roof. That's exposure that you have. You also want to look at, so vents, we looked at defensible space, and then we'll look at some of the structural aspects of your house. So roof of the house, it's the biggest exposure that you have. And we saw the embers coming and landing. And so where are there spots on your roof that you have to worry about? Well, number one, the roof as a whole. And you want to have a non-combustible roof. Right now, the building codes will require you to have a Class A roof. But what is a Class A roof? A Class A roof is a 1 hour fire rating. So that means that if a fire were to be on top of your roof, it'd be an hour before it could burn through that roof. If you're going to look at your roof, we'll take a look at a detail in a minute, but each roof system is tested. So if you have a metal roof, or you have a composition roof, or you have a tile roof. Each one of those has to be tested as UL testing for that 1 hour rating. The best information, any roofing contractor has that information for you. So that's the number one issue. But then there's places on your roof that you need to pay attention to. The number one is the roof edge. So here's a little detail of what your roof edge really should optimally look like. So a Class A roof, I just mentioned, you will have a plywood sheathing, you'll have a waterproof membrane, and you'll have some type of roofing material. But the edge, so the roof itself will protect you for embers that are falling there. But where you need to check, and this is people that have had their, haven't gone out and taken a look at what their roof, but at the edge of the roof, you usually will have a gutter. And what can happen is you can have leaves and stuff accumulate in the gutter. And so one of the biggest issues is, if you'll see the metal drip edge, that metal drip edge needs to be there. Because if you have any fire in that gutter, it can burn right up under the roofing material and get into your attic, and now you're gone. So what can you do? You can do, you want metal gutters, and you want that metal drip edge. So another area to look at is most wood frame houses, the rafters are open and you have an attic vent here. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. This whole area, if there's any type of a fire coming up from below, can get caught and go in through that attic vent or get your roof rafters on fire. So a safe way to do it is to put a soffit, a non-combustible soffit in here. You still can put the venting, and we'll show you how to do that in a few seconds. So here's a good example of a home that they didn't clear the gutters. So maintenance, clear your gutters. Otherwise, you've got a real problem. And the real problem shows up down here. Some homes in the early 2000s, people were putting in the plastic gutters. They're the easiest to put in, but this little demonstration shows you here what happens when a plastic gutter catches on fire. It melts, and then it usually falls off the roof and it ends up on the ground, and now you have a fire on the ground that can impact your structure. Metal gutters hold up better, and if you follow all the things that we just showed you before, you've got a better chance of survival. Tile roofs, where you have to do there is be sure that where there's spaces, that they're kept clean from debris collecting. This needs to be repaired. If you'll see with the tile, the barrel tile, those ends should be cleared. Otherwise you get birds nesting, you'll get debris, and then embers will get in there. So another spot on the roof. So we call it a complex roof. This is when you have a dormer, or you could have a gable or a hip roof situation. Debris tends to collect, as in the upper picture. And so best thing to do is make sure your roof is clean, because otherwise you have this situation on the right. You also probably should look at, so here on the left, you see there's wood shingles there. Probably more susceptible to fire and embers than anything. Best practice would be to, at least with the dormer areas, to go in, put new siding on it, either non-combustible siding, or put on, what you can do is put a 5/8 inch exterior piece of drywall there, and then put your wood siding or non-combustible siding over it. And now you have extra protection in that area. Skylights. Of course, the best thing is to keep your roof clean. This is obviously, some people live under the redwood trees and they don't clear their roofs. And if there's a fire comes through, you better have the Class A roof on there, or else you better keep that roof clear. Now, the skylights pose a problem. In the best case, the acrylic dome skylights, obviously you see they keep the debris off of the skylights, but in a high intensity, high heat fire, those are prone to melting, and then they could collapse. And now you have your fire coming into the house through the roof. A double pane glass skylight is the best. The chances are, even if you have a high intensity there, the top pane might crack, but this bottom pane will still prevent any fire from getting into the home. So definitely, if you have skylights, those are things to look at. So we talked a little bit about vents. You have vents in your roof. Why do you have vents in your roof? Well, you have vents that vent your whole house. Why is that? Well, if in the winter we have a lot of moisture, usually, maybe not this year, but usually, and you have to vent your house to prevent it from the moisture causing mold or fungus to grow inside. So a house needs to breathe, keeps the air circulating, but these openings now present a great place for embers to come in. And here's a good example of what it might look like in your attic. On the left-hand side, if you have a gable end, that's a bigger vent, allows things to come in. On the right-hand side, you have the vents that I showed you earlier at the top of the wall, or would be in the soffit area. And what happens in the attic? Well, it's dangerous. Usually, if it's a good sized attic, you have all of your old papers and cardboard boxes and storage things up there. At a minimum, you have an area that you haven't cleaned or investigated, and it has duff and it has things that catch on fire very easily. So the new recommendations are, in the past, you had screening like on the left-hand side, 1/4 inch openings. Now we found that embers can be much smaller than that. And so we want to go to an 1/8 inch ember screen. This is probably what your screening look like right now. And what is available now are several different types of screening and venting. On the left is probably the one that's most recommended now. And it has an intermittent paint in a honeycomb pattern. And what happens is when heat hits this vent, it expands and closes tight so that nothing can get in. I'll show you what it looks like in a minute. Other screening is 1/8 inch screening that is also good, valuable, or the baffle type of vent that has steel wool inside So it prevents any intrusion of embers. This is what the paint panel looks like when it's been exposed to heat. You can see it just seals right up. And that prevents any embers from getting in, and that's, now your house is pretty secure. So those all are relatively easy things to do with your house. And you've probably gone a long ways to creating a fire resistant home. Other places to look though, now to look at things that are going to be a little more costly possibly, what you do need to have on your windows, you can see what happened here. The heat cracked that window and now the fire could get in. They were smart to have Venetian blinds. They're non-combustible down there. And so that's another point that you want to take a look at. When you leave in the event of a fire, you leave, you either have non-combustible coverings there, or if you have just drapes or wood slats or something like that, you want to leave it open. You don't want that heat at the window cracks. So how do you prevent that? You want to go to a dual pane window. Just about every house that was built after 2008, I believe it was, has dual pane windows in it. If you have an older home, you need to check whether you just still have the single pane windows. And then one of your first priorities when you can afford it, you definitely would want to take them out and go to a dual pane. You can see why. The radiant heat from the fire is going to hit that first pane. It has it'll have a lot of thermal expansion. It's liable to crack, but you still have the extra protection of the interior there. When you can have a wood frame, if you have a wood frame around, you want to make sure that these wood frames are well maintained. You want it caulked. You don't want to give any place for an ember to be able to intrude or get into a place where it can catch on fire. So even with windows, what's the priority? Replace them. Make sure you keep plants and materials away from the windows. Maintain your wood on wood windows. Close your windows before you leave during a fire season. Don't forget to do that. And an extra thing that you can do is you could, in back east, they call them storm windows, but here you could have window coverings, non-combustible window coverings, similar to storm that you could put over top of your windows when you're evacuating in the case of a fire. Want to move along here. So we saw that deck area. Decks are definitely as important as the roof because they are where embers will land as well. And especially you think about an ember barrage coming at your house, where are those embers going to fall? In particular, they're going to fall right next to the house, right on the deck. And if you see that siding adjacent to the siding, that place is probably collects the most debris, and then that's where your embers fall. So recommendation here, at a minimum, the first 3 or 4 boards probably should be taken out if you have a wood deck and put in some sort of a non-combustible material. There's plenty of stuff that looks similar to wood, and I'll show you a picture of what one person did. You want to make sure that your joints are 1/4 inch wide, and you want to keep them clean. if you're building a new deck, you want your your joists to be 2 feet apart minimum, and then there's a tape that should be put on top. It prevents the buildup of debris, and it's easy to install. And then here's a good looking deck, and you can tell by the color, just the bare color difference, that the first 4 boards were replaced. And then this joint is really tight. It doesn't allow for any debris. So these are things that you should take a look at. You definitely have to maintain your deck in good condition. If you have a redwood deck, you want to make sure that it hasn't splintered, it hasn't dried out. You want to make sure to keep it in good shape. Best idea is to go to a non-combustible, and there are definitely materials out there to do that with now. Don't store materials under the deck either. Keep the deck clear underneath. You can make it look good, but dirt would have sufficed as much as gravel. You don't need to have the gravel, but definitely keep it cleared out. The other option is to enclose it with a non-combustible material. Other issues, fences. Fences connected to the house. Well, first of all, notice the lattice on the right. This was a big deal thing 10, 15 years ago, and everybody put it in. It was cheap and it looked good. But if you go touch it now, you'll notice that it's dried out, and it's almost as good as balsa wood. Just about any kind of a spark could catch it on fire. So highly recommend that you change out any lattice materials. The other problem with fences, if they're connected to the home, they can bring fire right to the house. Good example. The house caught on fire and the fence burned and went right over and connected. And now it's going to burn down the garage. How do you keep that from happening? Well, definitely you want to put a break next to the house. Maybe it doesn't have to be this big, but some sort of a metal gate or metal non-combustible spacing between the house and any fencing would definitely break it. And so you don't want fencing to be bringing the fire to the house. Here's I was just driving along the other day and noticed a fence that I haven't seen these types of fences before, but here's what I think you see more of. A non-combustible fence, probably not that expensive. You don't necessarily have to go to the metal, but it's an idea. Well-maintained fences, and what you should be doing is clearing it probably around your fences. If you have wooden fences, you want to follow that 5-foot rule and have it non-combustible next to the fence. And definitely you want your weeds cut down. So one of the more expensive things to do in homes, and it's going to be required with the new building codes coming up, wood siding burns and non-combustible siding doesn't. So this is usually a big expense to retrofit your house, but the safety factor can almost make it happen. So here's an example. They just set some fire right here. This was a wood siding here, not much left of it. And this was a non-combustible siding on the right-hand side. And if you look on the right picture, this is how the fire burns not only on the outside, but it comes through the joints and now it's into your house. So it's kind of makes you realize, like I said before, to caulk the joints around the windows, but you really should inspect your house for any area where a fire could sneak through a crack, and you want that to be caulked. So for instance, if you have T111 wood siding on your house, where the joints of those panels come together, those should be caulked. Another place that you need to be looking is at the very bottom. If you have even on a stucco siding, this bottom area, if you're not non-combustible right here, then fire could get into this mulch and it's going to get up behind the boards, even if you had a non-combustible siding, this area. So make sure you check that. This guy got a star. He did everything right. He's got 6 inches of spacing. He's got non-combustible on the right-hand side, and he's got non-combustible siding. So kind of just to take a look at it. You want 6 to 12 inches between the bottom of your siding and the bottom, your non-combustible space. And you can enhance it by 5/8 inch exterior drywall. So here's a quickie, folks. I think this will be available after. It's kind of, here's the things that you should follow, the basics. Once you have those, that should be your first priority. You get that done, take a look at your second 2 scenarios, whether you have exposure from any other buildings that are close to your home, less than 25 feet. Now you need to really worry about radiant heat. If not, then you want to spend some more time on your defensible space. So how do you get started? You need to set a plan of action, and here's who can help. Your local fire district can help. The fire safe councils can help. And one example is South Skyline Fire Safe Council. We actually have a group of people that we call our home advisory committee. And what they did was develop a checklist of things that you should look at around your home. Actually, if you contact South Skyline through our website, that you can arrange to have one of our volunteers come out and help you run through this advisory form. And they'll help you assess your yard, your home, set some priorities, develop a plan, and you can set a timeline for how you want to affect that. So it's like two pages long. It takes about an hour, and it's well worth it. And you can do it. Here's some couple of houses that have done everything. And these are the kind of houses you're going to see in the future in the Wooey area. So we have, I think you get a hold of all of this. I've got a list of other areas where you can find information on the web. Highly recommended book, Surviving Wildfire, right here. This is really well, this handles everything and looks at communities as a whole too, which is another subject that we'll probably get to. And then here's all the local fire safe councils information. Firewise USA, this is a community fire group that you can get certified, and once you organize your whole community to participate in preventing fires. And putting in a plug for the next one, I guess. Next Tuesday, the 27th, there's going to be a presentation on the CZU lightning fire. And that concludes my portion. Thank you. I guess I was a little wordy. Let's see if I can get out of here.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, it's off to John DeLong.
All right. Okay. Hello, everyone. This is John DeLong. I'm going to spend a couple of minutes here talking about a evacuation brochure that the South Skyline Fire Safe Council created a couple of months ago and just started distributing. And there's some great information in here, and we thought we'd take about 15 minutes and go through this. Prepared Not Scared brochure was originally developed by the Fire Safe Council of Santa Cruz County. And then after the last year's August CZU Lightning Complex fire, when pretty much everyone in the South Skyline Fire Safe Council area was evacuated because of the fire, we formed a committee to identify any lessons that we learned from our evacuation, and then we updated the brochure for our own purposes. Committee members were Deborah Bourne, Ed Hayes, Chris Pemberton, John Drew, myself, and then we had Teresa Drew do all of the artwork and layout. And I'll have a link to that brochure at the end here that you can get a copy. So the things you do in advance, you can sign up for emergency alerts within your county. We've tested these within the last month or two, and they all work. For San Mateo County, and I think most of the people here are in San Mateo County, you go to hsdsmcsheriff.com/SMC alert and sign up for emergency alerts there. For Santa Clara County, it's different. For Santa Cruz County, it's scr911.org. So you can write down that information, and I'm not going to read them all. You can also sign up for Zone Haven for for evacuation information at zonehaven.com. In Santa Cruz County and San Mateo County, Zone Haven is already in the works and already established. In Santa Clara County, Zone Haven is working on it at the moment, and that has not been established yet. But Zone Haven breaks the county up into zones, and you have to know what zone you're in order to get evacuation information and know when to evacuate. Also sign up for PG&E/My Wildfire alert, and that gives you information on when PG&E is doing their public safety power shutoffs, which is good information to have if you're living in the WUI area. And by the way, I know Ed mentioned WUI, and WUI means Wildland Urban Interface. And it's where the mountains and the trees meet where the people are living. So, and we refer to WUI a lot. So understand that WUI means Wildland Urban Interface. You can also sign up for Pulse Point. It's a mobile app downloaded onto your phone, and it gives you, it tracks feeds from San Mateo County, CAL FIRE, Santa Cruz unit, the CZU, from Santa Clara County Fire Department. You can look on there, and there's quite a few different resources that it tracks information for. You can also sign up for Twitter. These are the information for the various Twitter accounts. And then Facebook, CAL FIRE has their own Facebook page. I believe CAL FIRE overall, plus CAL FIRE CZU has a Facebook page as well. Good information from all of those. Other things you do in advance. This is prior to a fire coming. Keep your vehicle fuel tanks a minimum of half full at all times. Create a video inventory of your home and possessions. Make copies of all important documents, papers, insurance policies, passports, birth certificates, etc., and keep a copy of the video inventory with those. Check your flashlights, headlamps, radios, walkie-talkies. Keep fresh batteries nearby. Learn how to shut off your utilities, especially propane tanks, and make sure that other people in the family know how to do that as well. Purchase an ABC fire extinguisher and learn how to use it. You should have more than one in your home. Assemble a first aid kit. Learn how to manually open and close your garage door. In case of a power outage, the garage doors don't open. There have been lots of incidents of people dying in their garage because they can't get out. They can't figure out how to exit their garage and to evacuate for a wildfire. Pack go bags for every household member, and we'll get into that, of what goes into those, including pets. Collar, tag, and chip all your pets, and include pet photos in the go bags. So for people, go bag should include 7 to 14 days worth of whatever you need. You bring a list of contacts and maps of the areas where you're going to be going. Bring phones, chargers, computers, portable drives with documents and video inventories that you've created. Bring cash and small bills. They say that if all you have is 20s and you need to buy a bottle of water somewhere, that bottle of water may cost you $20. So bring small bills, bring bank cards, checks, bring your battery powered radio, bring your clothes, outdoor wear, toiletries, medications, extra glasses, extra car keys and house keys, jewelry and valuables, first aid kit, flashlights, headlamps, extra batteries, copies of important documents. Also prepare go bags for your pets. Have a carrier for each pet with the pet's name and owner contact information clearly displayed. Have proof of vaccinations, leashes, toys, sanitation bags, medication and food for 7 to 14 days, extra drinking water for each pet, owner and pet ID on each pet, and pet photos in case you get separated. What to wear when you're evacuating. Make sure you wear long sleeve clothes. Make sure they're either cotton or wool. Avoid all synthetic materials because they are flammable and they're going to melt against your skin. It's not good. Bring N95 face masks and goggles, sturdy, heavy-soled shoes, leather work gloves, wool cap and cotton bandana. Again, not synthetic materials. Reflective jacket or vest, headlamp with fresh batteries. I know I've mentioned that a lot of times, but that's important. Wool and fire retardant blanket. And that's what you take with you or what you're wearing when you're evacuating. For large animal evacuation, here are contacts for how to evacuate large animals. In Santa Cruz, it's equineevac.org. In San Mateo, it's smclaeg.org. And in Santa Clara County, it's the Santa Clara County Large Animal Evacuation. I won't read the entire thing. So a fire is coming. There's a threat, and what are you going to do to get ready? Assure that all members of your household know of the threat. Place fire extinguishers just inside the doors, easily visible. Turn off your air conditioner and ceiling fans. Fill jugs, sinks, and tubs with water and place large towels nearby. You move your flammable curtains and furniture away from the windows. Make sure that there's a space to be able to get through the rooms, but get things away from the window because of, as Ed was talking earlier, about the radiant heat that comes through the glass. It can catch curtains and furniture on fire. Move flammable patio furniture, umbrellas, barbecues, and doormats 30 feet away from the buildings. Place metal ladders against the building for roof access. That's for the firefighters if they get there. You set rakes, shovels, and clippers 10 feet from the house for firefighter use. Place full buckets of water outside near the decks and fences. You connect your outside hoses to water spigots and tanks. Do not leave sprinklers on or running. I know there's a lot of people who say it's a good idea to put a sprinkler on your roof and have it going and then leave, but that's going to empty. If you're on your own water tank like we have up here, that water tank is going to be gone. 5 or 10,000 gallons worth of water. And when the fire department comes to try to put out a fire near your house, they're not going to have any resources to do that with. Okay, so it's time to go. What do? You stay calm, you stay together, you wear protective clothing, secure pets and livestock into your carriers and trailers, load your go bags into the vehicles, load extra water into the vehicles, shut off propane tank, test your walkie-talkies or radios. That's assuming that you're taking multiple vehicles and you need to communicate between the different drivers as you're evacuating. Turn on all interior and exterior house lights. That's so that the fire department can see the house and can get around near the house. Close all doors, windows, skylights, and garage doors as you leave. You do not lock the doors. Firefighters may need to shelter from flames. I know this is a controversial issue. The sheriff's department tells you that you should lock your doors, but the firefighters say do not lock the doors, and we are on the side of the firefighters here. Not that we're against police, but I'm siding with the firefighters. You post a resident contact information in your front window. Who you are, how many people evacuated, where you're going, cell phone number, etc., so that if anyone needs to contact you, they can. You confirm your escape route with the people that you're evacuating with, confirm a meeting place, and have out-of-state contacts that you can call and let them know that you're doing okay. Drive with your vehicle headlights on, your air conditioner set on recirculate, drive slowly and defensively, and stay on paved roads. If you want to access the full brochure, here is the link. It's the southskylinefiresafe.org/links/ready-for-wildfire. And that is our where you will find our Prepared Not Scared brochure. And if you have any questions or more information, want to contact me, you can reach me at ssfsc.treasurer@gmail.com. And that's it.
All right, thank you both so much. Great presentations. We do have a lot of questions that we want to get to, but I also want to point out that we hear over and over that when people are evacuating, their knees get weak, they can't think, they have that brain fog. That's why what we're talking about now is really going to come into play. Do yourself a favor and prepare now to get ready for when you actually do have to evacuate. And I know a lot of you already know that. Okay, so what do you do about redwoods in zones 2 and 3? Who wants to field that one?
So essentially what we're looking for in zones 2 and 3 of the defensible space is really limbing up and removing the fuel from near the ground. So long as your brush and bushes and things like that are pruned and healthy and not a continuous fuel bed all the way up to your house, that's where the fire is going to go through. So if we can keep the limbs and the branches and the tree leaves and everything else far away from that, then we reduce the risk of the fire going from the ground fire up into a tree, and then it won't flare up and send embers everywhere. Or if the wind is really going and you have a bunch of trees close together, it won't turn into a crown fire. The key is to keep the fire as low to the ground as possible and reduce reduce as much fuel as you can, while obviously still having a nice yard and neighborhood and everything else.
Is there any way to treat a wood deck other than replacing it? So you already have the wood deck. What do you do now?
I just make sure that it's clean and it's not rough. It's not going to catch any any embers, and just try to keep it as clean as possible.
Okay.
And there were a lot of questions similar to that about the Trex decking. Is it fireproof? And it's got a B or C rating, but it's not fireproof. And the same thing you're talking about. You just have to keep it maintained, and once it starts to rot, it'll caught on fire more. And then the cracks in between, you got to clean any organic material. So same things they were talking about.
Some of the Trex are more plastic, and some are mixed with other materials. And I think there are some Trex that are more fire retardant than others. But I would, how do you know what you've got if you already have some down?
With the Trex, you have to make sure that you have a full thickness board. Some Trex, the cheaper Trex, have a hollowed out back, and that's flammable. So full thick Trex has a rating, a fire resistant rating. So that's one. There are other manufacturers out there that actually use cement fiber board, and those are non-combustible. And so you could go to that. What we found was the redwood decking in particular, if it's maintained and oiled, redwood trees don't burn too well, right? So the redwood deck is if it's well maintained, is going to withstand a certain amount. So that's one. The edge details are important along the house, like I mentioned, and definitely you want it clean underneath the deck, and you want it 5 foot away from the deck too. And then deck furniture off, and those types of things I think are your best chances.
Are there any products for paints or treatments for decking or siding that are proven to be fire resistant?
There are long-term permanent type of painting.
Yeah, I spent over 40 years in the paint and coatings industry, and I know that there are some intumescent paints out there, outrageously expensive. Never heard of them used on decks before. Never actually seen them sold. They're really hard to find, and technology may have changed in the last decade, but I don't know of anything.
Right.
What options are there when neighbors aren't being proactive about their defensible space?
Diplomacy.
This is the big one, right? So obviously you can only do things on your own property, up to your own property line. The rough part about defensible space and really combating wildfires is the fact that they don't care where the borders are. They're going to burn whatever's there in front of them and wherever the wind takes them. And so it really has to be a community movement. Everybody in the neighborhood has to get together and keep everything clean and defensible. Otherwise, you're going to have hot spots. It's a rough scenario. I won't give super specific progression as to what would happen to your neighbor if they just continuously don't maintain their yard, because unfortunately the statewide law is general up to 100 feet defensible space from their structure, but you can't force it over a property line. I'm not going to go into specifics because after that general consensus, every county and every local jurisdiction is going to have different ordinances. I can say that within San Mateo County, unincorporated San Mateo County, we would try very hard to make sure that the property owners understand the severity of the fire danger that they're going to have. We're going to have people going out, engine companies and inspectors going out throughout the year. We're starting to ramp up the program to do defensible space inspections. And it's just as much of a defensible space inspection as it is defensible space education. So a lot of the same points that Ed and John were talking about here are going to be a one-on-one with an engine company or a defensible space inspector and a homeowner to figure out exactly what they can do. I do remember seeing a couple of cost-effective questions in the chat saying like, well, these are really big ticket items, the roof and the siding and everything else. What can you do for a low dollar amount just to get things on the way? Those are going to be the specific scenarios with your own property that that you can handle one at a time. I can't really give a general consensus because that's pretty much what the webinar is for, is to hit priorities 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just like Ed was talking about. But it's going to be, as far as getting neighbors to cooperate, it's going to be just that. We have to all cooperate together, and I would say try to keep it at the neighborly level. If everybody gets together and helps out, then we don't have to go down the road of involving more and more agencies as things escalate. But if push comes to shove, then there are methods of employing code enforcement and other citations, but that's pretty far down the line. And we obviously try to make sure things get taken care of long before then.
And how flammable are solar panels?
Not at all that I know of.
Yeah, they're glass. They're not flammable.
And do fire safes work?
I'm sorry?
Fire safes.
Pardon?
People are asking if they work, if you recommend fire safes.
So fire safes they're rated for a set number of hours, and it's great if you have I mean, not great because your house would be on fire, but if you had a room and contents fire or a structure fire where the fire department came out and put out the fire, and your house is on fire for 30, 40 minutes, maybe even an hour, they're good for that. When we have to do large scale evacuations and there's a wildfire coming down the hill towards you and you're going to be gone for a week or two at a time, and we are going through mainly doing evacuations and perimeter control, your house is pretty much, the survivability of your house is going to be largely dependent on the home hardening and defensible space. If that fails, then your house is going to be burning for quite some time before we have enough resources to go around and put out each and every house. And the fire safes don't last for 20 hours, 30 hours at a time. They'll last for a few hours for sure and save your documents, but they're not an end all be all if something like the CZU Lightning Complex happens again.
Should plastic framed windows be replaced?
Say again?
Plastic framed windows, should they be replaced?
Okay, but with plastic frame windows, which are still popular, what you need to check, if the frame is all plastic, it'll melt. But most of the plastic frame windows that have been sold over the last 10 years have a metal or aluminum frame within the plastic. They're coated with the plastic. So those are still good. Those are as good as a wood window. So the plastic frames, I believe, went out around 2008 when the state codes were revised. So if you have an older home built before 2008, you need to check that. So that'd be the recommendation there.
On a steep hill, how do you have balance between the fire risk and the risk for debris flows? As it pertains to what vegetation you have on there.
When we're asking for defensible space, the biggest thing that you want to keep in the back of your mind, other than everything that Ed and John are talking about, is the last thing we want to do is to clear cut from county line to county line. We don't want we don't want San Mateo County to look like a barren landscape. we obviously need a lot of vegetation to hold erosion control and for the well-being of the environment. So it's going to become up to you as the property owner to figure out what that balance is between getting rid of a lot of low-lying flammable vegetation and removing enough vegetation so that you have a patchwork of brush and shrubs enough to hold the erosion control and to make sure that you're not losing, you're not having loose soil, but also so that if a section of brush does go up in flames, it's not going to easily spread to the next section, which spreads to the next section, which is then all of a sudden up against your house. And then we're off to the races with the wind blowing and everything else. It's isolating and compartmentalizing your landscaping so that it works both for fire safety as well as erosion control and obviously aesthetics because you're living there.
And there were questions about permitting. Obviously, you do have to obtain permits and do environmental reports so you don't disturb the soils and things like that. And some agencies, San Mateo County has been able to try to waive some projects from having the cost of removing eucalyptus, and those are things in the work, but it's all on a case-by-case appeal in different areas. So you want to make sure you follow all the rules, even though it's your property, there's still the rules you have to follow.
So one person says, for a lot of us, removing duff is nearly impossible. Do you have any suggestions?
The very minimum, I would suggest raking it 5 feet away from the house down to bare dirt. You may not be able to remove it everywhere on your property, but that first 5 feet is really important.
And are there non-flammable shrubs?
There are no non-flammable shrubs or plants. They're all organic and they'll burn given enough heat. But there are plants that don't get real woody and don't dry out. There are landscapers that are working on this. And I do know in Santa Cruz County, there's a landscaper association and they can help you with selecting plants. So yeah, but there are, I mean, that's not to say there aren't some that burn faster than others. So you should be aware of what you got.
And is there a cost-effective way to handle that lattice wood? You know, around the deck, and is there another way that people can handle that without having to replace it that's more cost-effective?
You could remove it if you had nothing flammable underneath there.
Yeah, just take it out and keep it clean under there. But leaving it there poses a threat.
Mm-hmm.
There was a question in the chat. I don't know if you can get. Someone asked, what's the effectiveness of weed whacking when you're just cutting the fuel down and leaving it there? Do you guys want to speak about the fuel arrangement or?
When something is laying against the ground, whether it's duff or cut grass, as long as it's less than 2 inches high, it's not going to maintain a flame for too long. It might smolder, but it's not going to have enough air behind it in order to really generate a lot of heat. So I think it's always a good idea to weed whack. The fact that the grasses are on the ground are good. It's not that doesn't create the problem. The problem is when they're standing up. So compared to the alternative, it's better to cut them.
And there were some plant suggestions into there. I kind of agree with. Succulents don't burn very well. So yes. When you were talking about the range for plants, they'll probably recommend succulents to you.
Yeah. Good idea.
That's true. Although I've seen pictures from the CZU fire of ice plant that burned.
Yeah, once the moisture is evaporated out of it, everything burns. Yeah.
Yeah.
What about the barricade gel to spray on homes? Do you recommend doing it yourself, even if State Farm says it will do it if fire is nearby?
I can speak. I actually own barricade gel. I've had it for probably 12, 15 years. It's you're supposed to shake it twice a year, and I've never had to use it, but I'm not sure that it's going to be any good after all this time. I do put it on the back of my truck twice a year and drive around for a couple of days to shake it up, but whether it's going to be there, you know, and ready to go, I don't know. It's those types of fire retardant materials should work if you have time, if you know that the flame's coming or the fire's coming, if you have time to spray everything down. But then they only are good for about 48 hours before they dry out, because it's water encapsulated with the oil. And once it dries out, if the fire takes, you know, more than 2 days to get to you, I think you might be out of luck.
Any opinions on artificial lawns?
Artificial.
I don't think that's gonna, it's probably a good idea. I don't know. I would think that it's not going to sustain a fire, that it may smolder, it may melt, it may catch embers and melt. But what do you think, Ed?
I don't want to see them in the WUI.
Do you have any data on the feasibility of the product that includes spraying fire retardant and putting fire sprinklers on your roof? We have been approached by a vendor that is marketing this in the area.
Yeah, I received a card from State Farm saying that they're going to be sending people out in case of a wildfire to possibly do that. Don't like the idea of the sprinklers on the roof, and I explained earlier that it'll empty your water tank, and then you're out of luck. Spraying the fire retardant's great because it's expensive, and if they want to do that, that's good. The insurance company will pay for it. But the real issue there, I think, is how many houses do they have in the area, and how many can those teams actually treat and get to, and whether you're going to be the one who they're going to try to save or not. You know, you need to do your own defensible space first and not count on them.
What can you recommend about putting organic materials back in soil so they hold on to moisture and the plants can take up that moisture?
Good. I think as long as you mix it in, what you don't want is a layer of mulch that's 2 or 3 inches thick and that the fire can catch and smolder in and move along the ground. As you know, take a look at, you know, make sure it doesn't come up against the siding of the house. I think that would be the most important issue there.
Like Ed nailed it right on the head. There's actually many different fires that have started from single lightning strikes out in the wilderness, and they have burned down into the heavy duff in the forest, and they smolder there for not only hours but days and days until the right conditions come up, where it's a hot day or a windy day. Then all of a sudden, 3 or 4, maybe even 5 or 6 days later, a full-on fire will come up from a lightning strike that happened a week prior. So if you have that thick mulch, that thick duff layer, like Ed is talking about, that's not going to be very conducive to maintaining that barrier, because we're going to come through. The fire crews are going to come through. We're going to see that your yard and your house is relatively defensible. There's no open flame. Great, cool. Everybody's gone. We're out. We're going to go to the next one and save the next house. And then there's nobody there. And then a day or two later, your house is going to catch fire from something that was smoldering underneath your 4 or 5 inches of duff. So long as you avoid that, like Ed was saying, I think it would be a decent idea. But it's definitely something to be monitored and to make sure it doesn't build up with your normal forest litter on top of it.
And John, I think you addressed this in your presentation pretty much, but does it help to water one's yard as much as possible prior to evacuation?
Yeah, I would think so. Make sure that all of your, you know, any any landscaping that you have needs to be well watered and full of water prior to evacuation. That's a good idea. Yes.
Yeah,
And I don't think I covered that.
No, and actually the only issue there is, like John had mentioned before, you don't want to use up your water source. So you have to be careful about when electricity gets shut off when you're going to be evacuated. So if you're on a well system, you want to make sure that you leave your minimum 5,000 gallon tank full of water for the CAL FIRE people to use. I'm going to back up on the roof fire sprinkler system. A well-designed one, the big issue with that is that if you have an alternative or an alternate water source available, in other words, you don't want to use the water in your tank that CAL FIRE might want to use to keep your house from burning. But if you have a pond or a swimming pool or something like that, then you might want to look at a independent pump system and sprinkler system around your house.
And then you've already touched on this one, but any specific trees that are the most dangerous that are critical to be removed?
Well, I think everybody here in San Mateo County can agree that eucalyptus is kind of high on the priority list from the oil content and the fact that it just drops so much material on the ground. I would strongly suggest, if you're trying to do any landscaping in the near future, to maybe avoid planting more eucalyptus. But if you want something to revert your property to more natural, more fire resistant vegetation, look for the things that naturally grow here. The redwoods in the high mountains, or the oak scrubland in the lower areas. Try to maintain that natural balance, because it's been here and it's evolved to live here for reasons that it works. The redwoods don't burn up, and then when you have an oak scrubland with dappled grass in between, you never really get that huge fire that comes through in a spread out oak field. So it's look for natural, what am I trying to say? The native plants, the naturally occurring, and try to stay away from exotic trees. Anything from especially from different countries or different climates, may or may not be the best suited to put all over your property, and especially close to your home.
And would you recommend removing bay trees and pine trees as well?
It's kind of along the same lines. If there's a bay or a pine tree that's overhanging your house and there's branches touching your roof line, I would say it would probably need to get trimmed or seriously looking at. If there's a bay or a pine tree that's 40 or 50 feet away, that's downhill from you, and it's healthy and doing its thing, then it may not be that much of a risk, so long as it's managed and maintained and pruned. It's going to be a case-by-case basis, but I would say the most important part when looking at what type of tree you want to have on your property is how is it going to fit in the defensible space? Which zone is it going to be in, and how much effort and time is it going to take to maintain that level of safety? You can have eucalyptus on your property. You can, if you want to be bold, you can go and plant more eucalyptus on your property if you just love the tree. The thing is, you have to maintain it. You have to get rid of all the debris that goes through. You have to make sure that all the limbs are pruned up. You have to make sure that it's safe for you and your community. And there's obviously some trees that are better at that than others. I would strongly recommend anything that's native to the area, and try to refrain from anything that's not from around here.
You might add to that, Austin, you don't want trees that have bushy canopies. You want them to be open. So that's why he's recommending the oak trees, the branches widen out so that, you know, think about embers and think about those pine bushes you saw in my little clip there, how fast that tree caught on fire because of the interior of that has the woody, dry stuff. So look at a tree that's more wide open, and so embers would blow through it rather than stick to it.
We are out of time, but we just want you to know that this presentation has been recorded and it will be available online across our social media, including YouTube. Just do a search of CAL FIRE CZU.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much for showing up.